After filming this episode of Crystal Uncorked, I feel hopeful. This was such a good conversation with my dear friend, family friend, adopted father, my business coach, Paul de la Garza. Paul just gives such wisdom in this episode to really help us in our journey of this thing called life. And really, what we talk about today can be used in your life, in your business, in your relationships. We cover a lot of ground in this episode. And so I'm really excited for you to tune in. And I would just really love to hear what your top takeaway is. So you can comment on Instagram, you can DM me. I'm Crystal Vilkaitis, or you can email cheers@crystaluncorked. But I really want to hear what your top takeaway was, because there's a lot of gold in this, and just personal development, business development, and again, hope for the future. Now, before we dive into this awesome episode, I want to just share a little bit more about my friend, Paul. Paul de la Garza is a seasoned professional mentor, coach, and public speaker. He is the principal at High Performance Solutions, a Colorado-based company that promotes personal, executive, and team coaching with an emphasis on leadership, sales, and high-performance training. His interactive and personal approach to speaking and training reaches his audience, creating a memorable experience, which I can completely agree with that. Prior to becoming a professional speaker and coach, Paul held several senior management positions in corporate America, including American Airlines, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, totaling 25 years of leadership experience. During this period, Paul led, mentored, and coached several groups featuring personal development, leadership, and sales training. He is a wealth of information. He's also so funny. We get a little bit of his humor in this episode, but also just a ton of heart. And so enjoy learning more about my friend, my coach, my adopted father, Paul de la Garza. Are you ready to open up and talk about all things business? I'm Crystal Vilkaitis, a curious entrepreneur who loves talking about business, especially over a glass of wine. I started Crystal Uncorked to share open and honest conversations about my journey and talk to other entrepreneurs about their experiences. We pull back the curtain and talk about the highs and the lows. Wine isn't required, but is recommended. This is Crystal Uncorked. Paul, welcome to Crystal Uncorked. I'm thrilled you're here.
Well, thank you, Crystal. It's my pleasure.
Yes. Okay.
I was looking forward to this for quite some time.
I know. I actually can't believe it's been this long that I haven't had you on the show, because like I mentioned in the intro, Paul has been my coach for several years, family friend, has so much inspiration and wisdom that I'm excited for you to share with my listeners today. Before we dive in, Paul, I ask everybody, what are you drinking?
At this point, I'm going for the hard stuff. I decided to drink some water.
Yes.
Okay. And frankly, it's yeah. I thought I would get to the wine, and somehow I didn't quite get to that point. Now that I see you drinking, I wish I would have done it, but hey, here I am.
That's all right. Well, I do have wine. I have a name that I cannot pronounce. It's from France, and it's basically, I don't know, I have no idea what it is, but it's a really light wine since it's a little earlier of us filming. It's very cherry and bright. So cheers, Paul. Thank you for
cheers
being
to you.
Here.
Cheers. Yeah. So
I want to
join you.
I want to dive right in, Paul, because it's actually so the timing, like the universe is hilarious because it always works out. And today I had a therapy session, and in my therapy session, something got brought up that you and I have talked about a few months ago, which is how people like myself really want to know where they're going. We want the final destination. We want to know, we just want the certainty, right?
Yeah, for sure. Most of us do.
The uncertainty is scary. And with me specifically, since Crystal Media is kind of running on its own, I'm experiencing some other passion projects, and you and I have been talking about those things, and I'm like so frustrated because I just want to know where I'm going. And you gave me some really amazing advice about getting in the car. And I was hoping that you could share that on the show.
Absolutely. Well, I wish I could tell you that the metaphor is mine. It's actually uh, generated in a talk that Jack Canfield, who was the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, brought up, which I thought was brilliant and brilliant in its simplicity. And it's this: when we sit down and we get behind the wheel of a car, and especially if it's in the evening, we turn on the headlights of that car, and that car is going to illuminate, well, those headlights are going to illuminate somewhere around between 30 to 50 feet in front of us, if that, okay? And if you turn on your high beams, a little bit more, okay? But that's about it. And we do not sit there and say, well, until I can see the destination in terms of where I'm going, I'm not going to put this car on drive. On the contrary, what happens is that as we put the car on drive and we start advancing the car, we begin to see something very unique, which is that the landscape begins to change. And when we see the landscape changing, we then respond accordingly. So if we come into an intersection, we stop the car because of a stop sign. If there is a house that we would like to see, we make a left and just to appreciate it. If we see that there is a detour or a dead-end street, we stop, we make a U-turn, and we go back. And the metaphor that Canfield was offering is that life, to a significant degree, is exactly that way. The point that he wanted to also make is that there are a number of people that, exactly what you just said, really want to have the final destination very clearly stipulated from the very beginning. And until they do, they will not put the car on drive. And this is where, unfortunately, a lot of people miss out on the most precious aspect of our life, which is the journey itself. Because the journey is what we take with us. So that's what Canfield was talking about.
And I found myself just sitting in that damn car. You were like, you got to get out of the car, or you got to start the car, get out of the garage, and just start driving. And you never know what you're going to find. And that, like, I think about that all the time, because I really do feel, I mean, do we really want to know that destination? I want something even better, bigger than what I can imagine, right? I don't want to put myself in that box, but we just have to start driving the car.
Exactly, because what happens is we cannot possibly anticipate every aspect of circumstances that we will be engaging with. And sometimes opportunities that we never dreamt may come our way present themselves, or challenges, or both. And the clear thing is that we have to have the confidence to be able to say, no matter what I deal with, and I believe this, Crystal, what I'm about to tell you, believe this. I believe that we have a pact with a supreme being, our higher selves, or whatever you'd like to call it, that we will never face anything that's greater than ourselves. And what I mean by that is that if we see that a situation is insurmountable, that somehow, some way, we have the emotional wherewithal or the intellectual wherewithal or both to be able to deal with that. It may not be necessarily to a point where we just avoid the challenge or anything like that. We just simply know how to handle that.
Right.
And when we have that kind of sense of self, we probably will enjoy the journey much more.
Totally. And, one thing that I realized today in my therapy session was I was in the car and I was saying the same thing of the destination and, along for the ride. And she's like, what if, the windows are down and you're listening to a great song and it's just you are just in that moment. And that's another thing too, of just being really present, being in the moment, that I'm realizing is very hard for me. And I know I'm probably not alone in that. I'm sure a lot of us struggle with being.
No, you're not. And frankly, it's a human condition that we all have. And the problem is not that we're there. That's not the problem. The problem is that we insist on staying there. And we have to be very careful that we become conscious of what we're doing, to become really present and to say, okay, I think I'm bringing some of the evils or some of the demons of the past, I'm bringing them to this situation, and it doesn't require or merit that I do so.
Yeah.
Or to live in the future. Well, you know what? I'm just waiting for these things to change so that I can actually change. No.
Right.
The here and now. It's all we got.
Exactly.
Tomorrow may never come for some of us.
Exactly.
Period. Okay? So we have to live to living our highest and best self in the moment that we have. I'm loving this moment right here with you because it's an opportunity not only for you and I to converse like we have done so many times, but for perhaps to share this exchange so that maybe, just maybe, if it reaches one person that finds some of the things that we're speaking of relevant, that it may benefit them.
Exactly. Like if somebody is listening right now who is sitting in the car in the garage and is not turning on that car, right?
Exactly.
Turn on the car. Turn on the car and get going.
Yeah.
Paul, you're my coach, you're Dustin's coach. You are a coach of so many people. I've learned so much from you. And I know you do a lot of one-to-one coaching and you have group coaching. Is there something that you are hearing from your clients collectively, a problem that a lot of people are talking about in today's world? And if so, what is that? And what kind of advice are you lending to them?
No, great. That's a really relevant question. And actually, it is probably so opportune that you would ask something like that, because I am feeling and dealing, not feeling, but I'm dealing with a number of challenges from that perspective from a number of my clients. And it's this. The last 3 years have probably been the most, I think it could be defined or categorized as crisis driven. And by definition, let's talk about the term crisis. Crisis is the condition that we face for which we do not have an established or clear solution, and that we have to create a solution at that point. So there's a convergence of things. Number one, it was COVID, post-COVID. Now the economy. We are in the midst of inflation. We are potentially looking at a recession. The situation of the international theater in terms of the war in Ukraine. I mean, there's so many things that if we do not really focus on certain things of which we're capable, we can find ourselves compelled by fear. And it's very, very important that precisely we don't do that. In the case of some of my clients that are in either real estate or in the finance industry right now, real estate and mortgage and finances in an upheaval of the ages. Interest rates have risen, have doubled in a year and a half. And the forecast that I'm hearing is that interest rates in a year's time might be at 10%.
Wow.
Coming from 2.5% to 3%. Okay. And to many people, this spells disaster, it spells crisis, etc. And there are a couple of things that I tell my clients to do. So first of all, I think it's extremely important that we understand that we're not going to be able to control a number of different things that are taking the planet. We cannot control a number of things that happen in our own personal lives. What we do control is how we respond to that. And this is where we have to become extremely deliberate and aware of what energy we are generating in response to those things. We have a couple of options. The first option is to actually create an energy of fear. Oh my God, where's it going to go? Inflation, the prices. Am I going to be able to actually make ends meet? Okay, and that's probably living in the future. Okay, we're not driving the car properly. We're driving the car, but anticipating, well, what if there's a pothole? But what if there's not? Okay, so the first thing that we have to be very conscious of is to make sure that we have to be our own sources of our own centeredness and inner peace by living in the present. So here's the thing. Consider this. We are responsible for the energy that we bring wherever we may stand. And this is extremely important because that energy could be an energy of joy, energy of happiness, an energy of anticipation, or energy of anger, an energy of fear. And what tends to happen is that the situation in which we find ourselves will adapt part of that energy. So what we have to be very careful of is that we have to be very conscious of what we're doing. And the first piece of advice that I give my clients to say, okay, let's stop. Are you aware of what it is that you are saying and doing when you speak in such a tone and when you say these things? Well, I hadn't thought about it. I said, okay, well, understandably, no judgment. Okay, I get it. Let's think about it. If you would like to hear what people are saying about you, what would you like for them to say? So, oh, well, I want them to say that I'm very cool and calm and collected and that I'm powerful and this. Great. Are you doing that? Probably not. Okay. Would you like to? And what happens, Crystal, that is as we evolve in these questions, we find out how accessible living in a centeredness is to all of us. We should not engage in an element of fear and an element of saying, oh my God, hang on a second. We do not know exactly how that is going to transpire. What do we have right now that is working? What do we have right now that we can count on? In other words, to really focus on what we have in terms of what we have to work with. Number two, what is the probable? Sometimes we have a tendency, Crystal, to actually illuminate and create circumstances and difficulties that were never there. Okay, we do that as humans. Been there, done that, guilty as charged. Okay, but it's very important for us to say, oh, well, hang on a second, is that really a possibility? Well, it could happen. Yes, anything could happen. But is it likely to happen? Well, I don't know exactly. What is more likely to happen? What's likely to happen is that I'm going to actually continue this and that and so forth. So, okay, great. Let's prepare. Let's not go into denial, but let's prepare, but focus on the present as best as you can. So the situation that I recommend them is to be in the present. The second thing is we are in the midst of a new normal. Think of what has happened as a result of COVID. How many people are working out of their homes, myself included, that before it was unheard of that you possibly spend 5 days out of the week working out of your house. Okay. Today, it's not only commonplace, it's almost the structure of acceptance within the private sector. Okay. So we need to start looking at our willingness mostly because the ability to change is there, a willingness to change and to accept the market, accept the circumstances as they truly are, and not find ourselves wishing, well, the market should be this way, or the situation eventually will change. Deal with what it is today, because we don't know when that's going to happen. So that's some of the advice that I give.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's such great advice. And I'm so one of those people too, where it's like, I'll create the problem before it's even got there. Like it's so easy for us to, especially if anyone is scrolling on TikTok or you're on social media and you're seeing all the negative, the fear, like the people who are unhinged and they're freaking out. And some of this is not true information. And you have to it's easy to get caught up in that. And you do have to take a minute of is this real? Is this something I can control? And step away from that and not create these problems out of nothing. But our mind is very powerful and it can take over.
It is.
So it's
and I'll tell you, I think that you referred to it a long time ago, which is a term that I still use with my clients. We have to get rid of the head trash.
Yep.
Because that self-talk is going to define our self-esteem, which defines the ways we behave, which defines the results we generate.
Yep.
And it all comes back to, what are we saying to ourselves? Am I the source of tranquility and acceptance, or am I the source of fear and potentially anger and anticipation or supposition? I'm going to assume that they're going to do certain things. No, don't do that. So yeah, we have to really take into account flowing and accepting the new normal.
Yeah.
When it's in front of us.
Yeah. If there's somebody that's listening that is like, but how do I even do that? I am a busy business owner. I have a million things that I'm doing. I have a family. I'm watching the news. I'm feeling fear. All the recession and interest rates and all the things. I mean, it's heavy. And
it is there it could be made to be heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be made to be heavy. So the first thing I would tell you is stop listening to the news. But how do I stay informed? I said, that's just it. That if you begin to be deliberate about what you're listening, you truly need to understand that some of the stuff that we're hearing is, frankly, just counterproductive.
Yep.
Look, let's talk about it from this perspective. we are surrounded by things that really have a direct impact upon the way that we behave and think. We're surrounded by music, programs, literature, news, and so forth. And what we really have done to a significant degree is to really undermine our own capabilities of distinction of what is relevant and what is not. And here's something that I was hoping that we'd get to, and I hope that you'll permit me to just simply bring this up. We need to rely on what our heart tells us as opposed to what our brain tells us. We need to rely on what is intuitive. We don't do that enough. There are a lot of people that are just in their head, period. And if it's five senses, and if I can't see it, smell, touch, and what is that sense that you have? It's probably indigestion. No, it's a sense of intuition that is telling you maybe what I'm thinking of doing doesn't feel right, or conversely, maybe it really feels right, and now I have that level of conviction. We need to trust ourselves more, but not necessarily from the standpoint of the thinking and so, but the thinking of how it feels to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So intuition is a very important part of the way that we should rely on the resources that influence us. We don't do that enough. We have that capability.
We so don't. And I'm one of those people too. And that's something that I recently had a friend ask me, like, what does your heart want? And I was like, so I've been trying to have those moments of like journaling. I've been just recently started to meditate a little bit more to really try to tap in. Because I feel like you have to give a little bit of space to really start to get in line with you. You've got to get out of your head and really into your heart. And for me, at least, that kind of takes some time. I have to get there. Do you have any tips or anything that can help people really check in with themselves?
Absolutely. And one of them, they probably have heard this 1,000 times, and they'll probably hear another 1,000 times. Meditation. And I'm not talking about you retiring to Tibet so you can become a Tibetan monk and meditate 22 hours out of every day. I'm talking about you pausing, closing your eyes for 10 minutes every day. Take a breath and exhale and begin to allow, because when we oxygenate, it's interesting the physiological impact that has upon our bodies. It begins to really relax a number of things. And when we do that, we begin to neutralize our fight or flight position that sometimes gets activated when we are under stress, when we didn't meet a deadline, when our boss yells at us, or when someone in our team did not do what they were supposed to, etc. So the more that we are at peace, the higher our ability to perform. I can tell you that the people in the private sector that have discovered this, that they're companies, Fortune 500 companies, that have meditation rooms for their executives and for their employees.
Wow.
Okay, they do. I don't think that's news to you. You've probably heard this before, but it's important because they recognize that this is a materially practical process to that added efficiency. So the first thing I would say is meditation is extremely important. Here's the other thing. I use the metaphor of the radio often. And the metaphor that I offer is, if you take a radio and it's just there and it's off, and you turn it on, what do you hear? And typically it's either static or you hear music. Okay, either one. And then you hear the music, and then you take the tuning knob and you start tuning it a little bit, and then you have the perfect transmission. And then you turn off the radio. So does that mean that signal that was coming through disappeared? No. It means that that the radio is no longer receiving that and transmitting it. A lot of us walk around like the radio with the radio turned off. Because that field, and I'm not trying to get Jedi here, okay, but that field is constant. And that's where the intuition comes from. If we start meditating, guess what happens? We become a little bit more creative, a little bit more inspired, it's like we find ourselves in the zone, as many people call it. And all it is that we have find ourselves at our highest and best self, but just simply pausing for those 10 minutes. And I want to reiterate, Crystal, to you and your viewers and listeners, 10 minutes. That's all it takes. Now, if you want to meditate some more, great. But the issue is not on the 10 minutes. The issue is that you do it consistently. Give yourself 3 or 4 times a week, and you do that, and you're going to be seeing subtle but clear changes in the way you're approaching certain things. Your capacity to discern a solution is that much clearer or faster. Things become a little bit more clear. You start finding certain joy where you didn't before. It's amazing what that can do.
Yeah. And to your point of just breathing and having that oxygen and taking that minute, like to help from an anxious perspective and just to get a little bit more grounded so we can see a little bit more clearly and know where to put our energy. I mean, there's just so many benefits. Love it. This kind of makes me think of something as you were talking that I recently heard that on a podcast called Don't Keep Your Day Job by Kathy Heller. And she was saying that she's a great name, right? She has a friend that constantly says, we walk around all day with 2 choices, authenticity or belonging. And most often people are choosing belonging.
Yes.
And I think that it made me think of that while we're talking about this, because part of, if our friends are really, oh, I'm really nervous, or I'm really scared, or I'm having a really hard day, or, what we're seeing, we want to belong, we want to be a part of it. And we don't want to speak up. We don't want to stand out. We don't, we want people to like us. And so we, right? I mean, hello. Yeah. And so I would just love to know your thoughts on that.
I think if in the process of belonging, you lose your sense of self, then there's a loss. There is a severe loss of our own lives and the richness of the things that make us, of which we are part of. Okay. What happens is that sometimes in the efforts of trying to belong, people will change their behaviors in accordance to the expectations of the person that they are in front of. This is an error. Because the irony is that the higher level of respect and acceptance that you gain is when people see that sense of conviction that is well balanced, if you will, but a sense of conviction and authenticity that compels people to become very respectful, is a term. And the acceptance process begins, but in a completely different set of terms. Whereas before, all you're doing is trying to incorporate yourself into conventional wisdom. So if you are in front of this person, conventional wisdom looks like greenish. If you are in front of this other person, it looks a little yellowish, and so forth. And when you least expect it, you've become an emotional chameleon. You know where. And people begin to distrust because they talk amongst each other. Whereas if you begin to truly begin to understand, and it begins in that self-talk. I have an affirmation that usually helps my self-talk. I lead a purposeful life in pursuit of the highest good for myself and for those who surround me. And I remind myself of that situation, and it helps me become authentic. I wish I could tell you that I've never been a chameleon. Are you kidding? I've done it. Okay, but it's a journey. It's part of the journey. It's part of the car driving.
Yeah.
It's okay. You've done that. The last thing you want to do is to start judging yourself because of the fact that you've done it. That's all right. What's important is, what are you going to do today? The next time you're in front of someone, if somebody tells you something with which you truly disagree, I'm not suggesting that you go and get in their face and say, oh, I think you're stupid and wrong for doing that. I'm simply saying, you know what? While I do appreciate exactly what you're saying, I look at it a little bit differently, but I also respect your position. In this way, the more discerning individual will look upon you and say, well, help me understand what your point of view is. I may learn something. Now, there's always someone that's going to say, well, you disagree with me, you must be a fool.
Right.
Okay. So, yes, I encourage you to make sure that you trust yourself and that you call upon your better angels so you can say, hey, listen, I truly think it's this way. I'm not going to necessarily, even if you say nothing, I'm not going to concur with that individual in the efforts of trying to belong. Because eventually, Crystal, what will happen is that you will begin to have a sense of self, a very joyful and peaceful sense of self that is your true authenticity. And this is what we begin to discover.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that
I can talk about this for another hour or two, but
we could probably have like a 2-day workshop on
yes, we could.
authenticity. But it makes me think of leadership, because I know that you coach leaders, and leaders need to be authentic. And and I mean, I think that some leaders just want their teams to like them, and so they don't lead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, the teams wind up not respecting them.
Exactly. Now, Paul, shifting gears a little bit, but you were talking about saying, but I disagree with you. And there's a way you don't get in people's faces, but to just kind of stay true to who you are, because you're not going to agree with everything. You have a process for debating and negotiating that can help create new ideas. Will you talk about that?
Oh, sure. Actually, again, it's the automobile metaphor that we talked about. This process that I'm talking about was actually introduced by a gentleman by the name of David Brooks, who is a renowned columnist for the New York Times, and he's a brilliant mind. And he's written a number of books. And he talks about the gem statement. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about the gem statement. So in other words, when there's two people that are talking about, they're about to engage into a debate, the first thing is that both individuals come to the conclusion that they both would like to have a result of the debate that would pretty much be similar, okay, to both their expectations. It's just that the debate has ensued as a result of the way of getting to that point. Okay, so this is what we call the gem statement. And they both say, okay, I think that what I want out of this is this, and this. I would like to have, let's talk politics. I like to have healthcare achieved so that people can do it, and this and that and so forth. I said, great. I want healthcare as well, et cetera, et cetera. We're both doing that. However, I think healthcare should be addressed and administered this way. Okay, well, I think that healthcare should be administered that way. So when the debate begins, it's healthy, because while we may have a very clear understanding in terms of what our position is, we're constantly listening. And when we start listening to the other individual, the richness of the debate really begins to flourish to a point that, get this, the conclusion, which is a compilation or result of both thoughts, becomes much richer than the sum of both parts. In other words, you develop an intellectual synergy. And when you have that kind of thing, it is astonishing to see the things that have been able to be realized. Case in point is that the initial concept of the government that we abide by today is in its structure. Okay, when the founding fathers put this together, the genius was that they knew that rich minds will eventually evolve to be bringing the nation to the next level through this rich debate. But it requires compromise, because there are people that enter a debate with a position of being absolute and that they will win no matter what, and then if they win, the other party will lose. And you know what happens when there's a win-lose proposition? Whatever conclusion is drawn will not last. It's not sustainable. When you have both parties blend a compromise and at the same token achieve what they want, you have created an extraordinary achievement of unity, community, communication, and the fabric of that culture of those two people or that company or that family gets tighter.
Beautiful. Which you put this on your guest form for the show about how we need to listen more versus being heard and understood. Yeah,
Oh
like
my
we need to
gosh.
understand. Yeah, it's a problem.
Seek to understand more than we want to be understood. If we would begin to practice that on a daily basis, just, okay, so tell me once again, tell me how you would see that working. And all of a sudden you kind of go, no, wow, there may be something to that. That doesn't mean that you're less or less intelligent or anything like that. It means, on the contrary, that you're a discerning individual that is prepared and willing to learn. And in the process of you doing that, you validate the other person. And guess what happens again? Connection, community. If we did that more as a nation, as a people, I think that this planet would be in a different condition.
I completely agree. And relationships would be so different.
Oh, good God, let's not go there.
Oh man, I have
Yeah.
to say, I think Dustin would agree with me on this. I seek to understand him. Like, we have different opinions, right? And so, and I might be like, I don't agree with that at all, but I still will be like, okay, but tell me why you feel like that, or why do you need that? Because I want to understand. And then through that, it's often like there's actually something else that's there that I'm like, oh, so it's that. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And then it's way easier. And then he's totally heard, right? Like, he's understood. He feels good. He might drop his wall. And it's great. I feel like we have really good communication.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And if I may, let me give you a very brief example. Just yesterday, I was sitting with a business that is family owned. And this woman that started this business is a remarkable person. It's a remarkable lady. She came to this country with virtually nothing, and she's built a firm, albeit small, but the billings are $500,000 a month. And, for a small company, not bad.
Yeah.
Okay. She's done it herself. But in the process of doing it, as she started to be chief cook and bottle washer because she had to do everything, she still has that autocratic seizures every so often where she starts telling people what to do and how to do it and so forth and so on. And it's starting to annoy the offspring, the children, who are now active in the leadership of the company. And I had to ask the question, and I said, can I ask you a question, all of you? Have you truly understood the motive behind the words? Have you sought to really understand? I said, well, what do you mean? I said, I'll put it a different way. What could possibly be her intent? Do you think her intent is to possibly injure you, damage you, frustrate you? And they all looked at each other and looked at me. Absolutely not. I said, right. And they stopped. I go, okay, we get it. Because up till that point, they had not taken the time to just simply say, okay, so she's saying this. What is her real meaning? Okay. What is her real intent for us? And this is a woman that would die for her children. So seeking to understand is such a powerful measure. It's right up there with forgiveness. Right up there in the same qualities. Seeking to understand validates the other person. You recognize that the other person has something relevant to say. I have a definition of humility. The definition is humility, the recognition that the people that surround you have something to offer you to make you whole. And we begin that, and we begin to understand these things, and all of a sudden, the person that next to us becomes more relevant. And we say, okay, well, tell me more about that. Help me understand how that would work, those kind of things. And again, we build that community. You want to belong? That would be a way to do it.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful connection there. See, isn't Paul great, listeners? Like, you just, every time I'm like, I just could sit here for hours and just hear you have so many stories. You have such great advice and wisdom. You're just doing a lot of good in the world, and anybody that works with you is incredibly lucky, me included, because you're just really like,
you're being way too kind.
No, I really mean it. Paul, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to say before we sign off here?
I think we've covered pretty much the more relevant things that when you invited me to, and again, thank you so much for this very, very kind and generous offer to participate with you and your viewers. The only thing I would say to you very briefly, just to close, is we're going through some very interesting times. And it is extremely important that we recognize the power of one. That's us. That wherever we stand, we have the ability and the choice to either become a light or darkness. That we become compassionate in seeking to understand, or become self-serving and just simply narrowed. We have those choices. The key thing is that if you've done the narrowing or the darkness, it doesn't matter, because we've all gone through that rite of passage. The question is to discover the wonderful things of which you are capable, because you are. We're all connected, and we all have extraordinary capabilities. So I would tell your audience, have faith in yourself and the people that surround you. You'll lead a rich life.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for closing that way, Paul.
My pleasure.
Love it. Where can people learn more about you?
You can go to www.highperformance-solutions.com. It's my website. There's contact information there. As you mentioned, I offer services of leadership, coaching, and training. I'm a practitioner of change management, and we do services of that and of sales as well. So that would probably be the best. If you prefer the phone, it's 970-672-3602. And my email address is p.delagarza@h-pbs.com. That's p.delagarza@h-p as in Paul, B as in boy, S as in Sam.com.
Beautiful.
That's me.
Beautiful. And we'll link to that on the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Paul. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. The power of one. Choose light. Give love. Be love. Cheers, everyone. And I'll see you on the next See You. Thanks, Paul.
Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye. Hey, real quick, if you are a retail store owner, I would love to see you at Evolve. This is my in-person marketing conference happening April 26th and 27th, 2023 in Denver, Colorado at the Gaylord Rockies, which is a stunning venue. You get to spend 2 days with me and my team and keynote speakers, as well as other retailers looking to evolve their marketing, business, and lives. It's an intimate event. We only have 200 tickets available, and we've already sold a lot of those seats already. So this event will sell out. Do not delay, because we have special pricing depending on when you hear this and when you sign up. And I would love to see you in that room. So go to crystalmediaco.com/evolve. That's crystalmediaco.com/evolve to get your ticket. And I would love to see you there. And thank you for listening to this episode. Bye.